Hey folks, I'm John Jennings with Royer Labs, and we have a really nice session coming up today. We've got Tim Pierce, the exceptional guitarist, session player, and Rick Beato with us today, talking about how they record electric guitars with ribbon mics and then anything else that they use ribbon mics on. Both of them are musicians with deep backgrounds who've been using ribbons for years. And as a quick introduction, Rick Beato has a YouTube page with over 2 million subscribers that has got some of the most interesting videos on music I've ever seen. I watch it regularly. He's also a producer, engineer, musician. I believe he's got a #1 hit to his credit, and a lot of stuff going on. So Rick is with us, and then Tim Pierce is a session guitarist who, if you start looking at the records he's played on, you realize it's probably easier to find the records he hasn't played on. He's played on so many, and he's a phenomenal guitarist. He's got a recording setup that's just second to none, where you can capture any kind of a sound and play in any different style you're interested in. Deep musical chops, and the two of them are Rick and Tim are good friends, and really looking forward to them talking today about recording music and how they use ribbons and so forth. So, guys, take it away. Where are you? There you are.
Hello.
What's up, John?
Tim Pierce, Rick Beato. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, you know, I can dive in for 2 minutes if you want, and just and then hand it off to Rick if you'd like.
Go. Sounds good.
I've always used a 57 and a Royer, and those Royers have changed over the years. I took the big plunge and bought a 122V from you guys. And since I've been using that, it's got that, like you described, it's that fairy dust, that little bit of fairy dust on top that you get from the tube and whatever you've done with it or to it. Of course, I've used the 121 forever. And I have a story to tell. Before Ed Cherney passed away, I ended up at Capitol with him on a session, and for some reason I was using a Fender Deluxe, which is pretty odd for me because I rarely use combo amps. So we set the Deluxe in the middle of this huge orchestra room. You know, it's kind of silly when you do that. And then he takes a 121, he puts it back from the actual Deluxe about 1.5 feet at a slant. And I'm thinking, Ed Cherney, you know, he was a very, very confident guy and a very forceful personality, very, very nice, but no, you know, the experience of, you know, of doom, you know, and so you're not going to question him, but I thought, what's this going to sound like? And went in the control room and it sounded amazing. I was using a Strat and it took all the rough edges off the Strat tone, and it was smooth and warm, and it was just wow. So that's my opener.
Good opener. Thank you.
Well, like Tim, I've been using a Royer with a 57 for, I don't even know, 15 years, 20 years. I mean, I have a 121, which I have right here, and I have a 122V. I've done a few videos, a couple of my biggest videos on my channel, where I did the, I don't know, top 20 drum intros or something. And the main mic is the 122V, and it just sounds killer. It's so natural sounding. It's fat. Everything that Tim says, the fairy dust. I basically got the 122 to copy Tim, though. I remember the first time I went to Tim's house, I said, okay, so where are you? You know, I was in the studio. I was like, so where is your cabinet mic'd up? He says, oh, it's down here. So we go in down below, and he's got a vault, and I go in and I see the 122 and the 57 right there on the cabinet. And so basically I had to get that. And then I had to get this, I had to get the Park amp that Tim was. I basically had to copy the exact sound that Tim was using as soon as I walked in. I said, that sounds amazing. I want that. So there you go. Thank you, Tim.
Well, thanks, Rick. Yeah, the one drawback of my system is because I have a vault downstairs that I can't see. I can't actually see the 122 glowing I've often thought that maybe I should put a camera down there just so I can look at the mic setup and display that. But I don't know. It's really important to have something warm on the guitar, because the guitar actually can always have a little too much top end and always be a little harsh. It can go there. And one of the greatest solutions when I face that is I just turn down my 57 and I turn the Royer up. And then all of a sudden I'm getting smoothness, and it takes away some of the harsh top end. I know anybody who plays guitar deals with that. You go, okay, it's a little brash on the top end, and the Royer cures that. That's one of the other things that it does. Mic placement is crucial, but in a sense, it's kind of a no-brainer. What used to be a mystery years ago is now simply putting both mics kind of where the paper meets the cone. And then some of our favorite engineers like to close mic. Some like to have it about an inch back. But for me, if you put the 57 right where the paper meets the cone and then the Royer right next to it, you're set. You could even bring the Royer in on the cone and just kind of reverse that, and that would work too, because the Royer is so mellow. You get all the harshness from the cone. I think everybody kind of knows that at this point. If you put the 57 right in the center of the cone, it's harsh. So you got to move it to where the paper meets the cone. And even if you're dealing with maybe if you're a producer and you're dealing with a player who's getting a harsh sound, one of the tricks is to move even further away on the paper. And in the heat of battle, that's a way to make a guitar sound more palatable. It's just to take the mic and move it more into the paper. But for me, it's where the paper meets the cone. But you can literally take the Royer and put it on the center of the cone, and it's cool. So the one thing I don't have is I don't have that cool mic stand that combines the both of them. Are you guys going to talk about that?
I have that, and I use that all the time. The clip. I actually was looking for it before but it's in my ISO booth on a stand. But I've used it in videos where I am comparing mic cabinets, guitar cabinets, because it's easy to move and place in the same spot on a different cabinet. I basically will mark the edges of the cabinet and then move a second cabinet in, mic the same speaker relative, and it's easy where nothing really moves. You keep that exact position of the two microphones in relation to each other. And that was a great invention. I can't believe I always used on snare, I used like a small diaphragm condenser, a KM84, an AKG 451, along with a 57, and I would blend those. And we would always just put them together with zip ties. And then somebody came out with that mic, and then somebody came out with that mic clip, and then they came out with the Royer mic clip, which was just perfect.
Well, let me ask you something. Does that mic clip help you with phase accuracy between the two microphones in any way? Or do you still have to make sure that the 57 diaphragm is actually matched to the Royer diaphragm by just pulling it back?
Yeah, that's what I do. I actually will move the 57. I'll kind of pull it and get it right in phase with it. So, but once I have it on there, it's very tight in the thing and it does not move, which is great.
I find phase accuracy pretty easy. Some people are kind of scared about that, but I never have been. And I had a friend who would go down there, and we would take the waveform in Pro Tools, spread it out so far, and just until we got both mics to where the actual waveform was the same. It never exactly matches, but if the two mountains are really, really close, then you're perfectly in phase. But I can often do it now just with my ear and just sightlining it, but you do have to make sure, a little bit of guesswork, you have to make sure that it's not the front of the mic, it's where the diaphragm is, right? Where the two diaphragms that are in the microphones have to be matched. And that takes a little guesswork sometimes, but once you get to know where it is, you can kind of remember.
Yeah, I would always, tell people that if I'm working with a new engineer, get in with a flashlight and look where the diaphragms are, because they are really different. Every mic is different where the diaphragm is. Some of them have a windscreen that sticks out a long ways, and so when you're using multiple microphones, you have to really be cognizant of that. I was thinking, Tim, where did I first learn about using a 57 and a 121 because I've been using it forever. And I want to say it was in Nashville at Blackbird Studios, maybe with Joe Ciccarelli or some, back 2005, maybe a long, long time ago. But it was with a great engineer, and that's how they mic'd guitars. But I want to say it was Nashville though. And I live in Atlanta, and I've worked at studios up there a lot, and that was really kind of a go-to guitar miking thing in Nashville, 20 years ago. People were using the combination of the two.
I wonder I wonder who first, maybe you would know, John Jennings, who first started doing this, and was it in Nashville? And then it came, I wonder who did it first. I bet I know some people who would know. Do you, John? Do you know who?
I have a couple thoughts. Actually, Fletcher at Mercenary Audio was one of the first to do that and started spreading the word, because back when we started, Mercenary Audio was a pretty big deal, and Fletcher was disseminating all this recording knowledge. Also, Richard Chicky was recording Aerosmith and started mixing the mics himself. He told me, "Hey, I tried this blend and it was great." Also, Dan Huff.
In
Nashville. Yeah. I think Dan might have been who you heard that from, because it was Dan, and he was working with a lot with Kneebanks, Justin Kneebanks.
Justin Kneebanks, yeah.
And Justin was telling me once they just started doing that blend, and that became the way that they did. And it's still the way they do it. In studios a lot out here, except for right now while we're all locked down. But you always see the 57 121 blend on guitars.
Yeah, I had the privilege to do a Rascal Flatts record up in Santa Barbara with Dan Huff and Justin Kneebank, and they put my 412 in a closet, and of course they did that miking, and it sounded phenomenal. And that was like the Ed Cherney story. I was a little like, is this really going to work? Because usually a small room does affect the sound. You know what happens. The wave comes back and pollutes the microphones, which is another thing I want to talk about. But I was astounded at how good it sounded. And they literally took this studio up in Santa Barbara. It was called Santa Barbara Sound, very, very kind of legendary old school 70s build. They brought a team in 3 days before and turned it into a world-class tracking room where everything just clicked.
Wow.
Really smart people. It was really, really a pleasure. And Justin's definitely one of the most high energy people I've ever worked with. But let me talk about something that you do need to know when you're combining microphones. You actually have to sum two mic pre's. There is no way around that, correct? I mean, if not everybody in our listening audience is going to know actually how you have to do this. And there are lots of, it's easier now because some people design mic pre's that actually sum. I mean, BAE has a 1073 pair where you can put the Royer and the 57 into the mic pre. It's called the Steve Stevens mod, and you can blend them. Now, there's a little reduction in gain that you have to bring back, but that's easy to do. I blend my microphones with a line mixer that I bought a long time ago made by Chandler. But there's lots of great choices for blending microphones, more than ever before. I don't know what's out there now that's affordable, but that's the thing. If you want to do this, I think it's a bit hairy to actually record the parts on 2 tracks into your DAW and blend them later. I don't think it works as well. I think you want to blend them at the mic pre or the mixer after the mic pre so that you're done. You make the blend and you're done. I mean, that's what all our pro friends have done with their consoles. So that's one thing that is a practical thing that you do have to do when you blend these microphones. And the other thing I did want to say really quickly is that the room makes a huge difference. I have a large vault in my garage, but it's still not a great environment. So by hanging packing blankets, I've been able to kind of break up the bass wave that comes back in a huge way. And you interpret this bass wave as great bottom end. When you first hear it, you think, oh, that's a fat sound. But what it's really doing is polluting the top end. And I've noticed when you go into one of the big grand rooms in LA and it doesn't have that bass wave, everything sounds so glistening and pristine. And then I come home and my thing sounds good, but there's all this woo. And so I've had to deal with that. And you can dial it out, and I have dialed it out. But if you're using a small environment with your microphones and a loud guitar cabinet, you need some sort of bass trap, or the most simple solution. And I know high-end engineers who do this. If you take your guitar cabinet and you put the Royer and 57 in front of it, and you take it over the whole package, it will take care of it. And I've done it in big studios where you're tracking, and the drummer takes the big live room and you're in an ISO booth. The engineer will take a packing blanket and put it over the entire thing, and it takes away that bass wave and solves it.
You know,
Nice.
Tim, I have 5 huge pieces of foam that's probably 6 inches thick that will actually become a vault, so I can put it around the cabinet or around around a combo amp. And I there's a studio I recorded at back in the 90s, and they had these huge blocks of foam, and you'll see them in studios. They're very hard to find though, and I will put it in there and then just build the fort around it, and then I'll throw, if I don't have one on the top, I'll throw a packing blanket over the top of it, and it's exactly right. There's no bass pollution once you do that.
You know, I see that on the road too. I see guys taking the amps and just throwing a packing blanket over it, and then you dial out the acoustics of whatever space you're in, if they've got the amps backstage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like looking at stuff, and it takes away your whole pleasure at looking at the rig. That's my only thing with it. When I go out to my booth, I go out there and go, God, I wish I could see that old Marshall cabinet and these beautiful microphones, you know. Anyway, I digress. We all like to look at cool stuff, you know.
I have my main ISO booth where I track guitars is right off my control room, and it's a floating floor, and I have glass, you know, double doors, and I usually will put the foam in front of the door so I don't get any reflection off the glass there, and the room's very, very tight. There's no real weird bass frequencies in it, and I like being able to see. I like being able to look through and just, you know, check the setup out, and I can turn, you know, I can put a plexi on 10 and you can't hear it through the wall. I mean, even though it's only about 15 feet away or so, but through the 2 doors, it's very close tolerances. Yeah, it's very isolated, and it's just nice to not, you know, to be able to walk in there and move something around if you need to, if you have to just kind of tweak a mic or something. But this now with that stand, Tim, that is just, or with the clip, it's just made it so easy to deal with having those things on. So I typically will just I'll leave the 122. And I'm so glad that when I saw yours, that I got the 122 after. It just does add that extra sparkle along with the 57. That was a beautiful. I mean, I still use my 121, but I'll use that if I'm running 2 different amps in 2 different rooms or something like that. But I typically use the 122. I just love it.
Yeah, it is definitely worth the money, and I'm happy that I actually bought a second one too, because I have a new Marshall cabinet that's used to be Todd Rundgren's, and it has the old 25-watt speakers, and it sounds great. And I'm gonna put it on that. I just haven't got to it yet. But I also need to get a couple of those mic clips. So this is my ask right here. I need to get a couple of mic clips.
Note to self.
I want to say I got it before they even put it out. Or I mean, I got it right when they put it out, but it was back ordered for a while because everybody thought, oh, we need to get this. It was just
and yeah, I remember when you got it, and I just, you know, we get so busy that you forget to actually remember that this thing could really help you. The other thing I want to talk about really quickly is that I think in your case and in mine, we don't actually do endorsements per se. There's no, my association with Royer is I truly use the product and I pay for the products, and it's a great position to be in because my income comes from my session work and my online subscription and my education subscription. And so that frees me to actually have these pure relationships with people. So, you know, it's important sometimes that everybody know that we actually use these things because they're life-changing to us in the actual sounds that we make and what we create. And it's it's often better for me to pay for something than to deal with all the ramifications. Well, it's always better than all the ramifications of any kind of a fee or an endorsement. So just in case anybody's wondering, it's something. These are things I love paying for, and I do.
You know, when I'm doing any videos I'm recording, even if it's one of my top 20 list videos that I do, I always talk about the signal chain that I'm using out of respect for the gear that I like to use. And I'll say, okay, I'm going through this 122V. It's going into a BAE, 1032 or 1073. And that, to me, it's really important to tell people about the gear that you're using, even if it's not necessarily relevant to the video. But I think it is relevant to the video to actually talk about the signal chain. That's I mean, I'm not sure how many people care about that necessarily, but I care about it. And I think it's important to acknowledge with the gear that you're using and that you believe in, things like that.
Yeah, I should start doing that. In the case of one of your videos that gets 700,000 views, there might be 20,000 people that really think it's important, or 200,000 people that really think it's important. So yeah, that's a very legitimate thing. I wanted to talk about one other thing. When Royer, these Royer products, and particularly the 122V, which I graduated to, so I didn't go. It took me years to take a deep breath and go, okay, I'm going to spend this money on the 122V. But what I'd like to stress to people, and I've always experienced this in my 40 years of being a professional. There are pieces of gear that if you buy them, you can use them for the rest of your life. And there's nothing really that you have to look for after that. I mean, if you buy the right mic pre, a Neve or a Neve clone, you don't need to buy anything else. That's unless right. You want a second one or a fourth one or a fifth one. There was an amp in the 90s that I bought called a Naylor Superdrive 60, and that changed my life for a decade. And then Fred Tacone developed the Divided by 13 RSA 23 with Rusty Anderson, and that changed my life from 2000 until it's still changing my life. So a lot of people think you have to keep searching, but there are pieces of gear out there that never get surpassed. Vintage Celestion speakers, or even good reissue Celestions. There's certain pieces of gear that you buy them once and they're yours for the rest of your life, and they change your life. And how do you attach a value to that? I mean,
I totally agree with that, Tim. 100%. It's you're better off. I mean, the microphone, other than the instrument, the microphone, and then the mic pre. I mean, the order of importance. The microphone is an EQ. That's the way I look at it. It has these qualities that capture the sound in a particular way. And if you're going to invest money, invest it in these things that really make a difference right at the source. Get a great instrument, guitar amp, acoustic guitar, whatever it is, and then the microphone next, then the mic pre after that. And if you buy something really good, you can use it for 50 years.
Yeah. If you got a guitar, it's been a favorite for like 20 years, 30 years, sometimes like something you just never get rid of. It's like that when you buy good gear. By the way, when you were talking about this, I was looking for that mic clip. It's called the Axe Mount, and I couldn't find it. The reason I couldn't find it is because it was sitting directly in front of me instead of all over where I was looking. So I sat down and said, I'll forget it. And then there it was. So if you want to take a look at it, that's the clip. So the mic faces the amplifier this way. You've got a 57, just getting in the camera here. You got a 57 and the 121 together. One clip, one mic stand, just.
Oh, it makes it so easy.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse to me when I'm double miking an amplifier to have two mic stands next to each other. This is just
hard.
It is hard. It's just a pain in the butt. This is just so much easier. Oh my God.
I watched that for years. Just walk into studios, and if you ever need to move anything, you've got to move the whole rig. So it does make life a lot easier.
Well, what's next?
I see some questions here.
Let me get over here and see what we've been asking. So, any thoughts about the? It was why blend the mics before and not mix the two tracks. I will just say something quickly about that. What I've heard from everyone I respect who's mixing this stuff, you commit at the source, because you hear something, once you find that blend that you like, that's it. Commit to that instead of passing that down the road to either the day you mix and you've lost that initial energy, or passing it off to someone else to mix who might not feel the same way. Tim did a whole video series with the engineer Ross Hogarth in LA on blending mics, blending 121s and 57s, and then stereo mics and a lot of different stuff. They're about, Tim, 8, 9 different videos. And it's a great series. A lot of people have watched them. And if you go on Royer's website into our audio video library, you'll find all those videos and you'll learn a lot about blending the mics there.
Yeah, I have a very strong opinion about that. With what we do, if you're recording a song with, an ensemble, bass, drums, guitars, keyboards, whatever you're putting on it, you're already in danger of getting lost in the weeds in a lot of ways. And if you have, in my case, I'll throw down 8 guitar parts. Now in the DAW, if that becomes 16 guitar parts, and then I have to decide to blend 2 microphones after the fact, you just get lost in the weeds. And plus, I think that I get enormous satisfaction out of blending the mics. It's worth it. And I think it sounds better. And in the moment, you know exactly what to do. I mean, having too many options, I think there's a Buddhist thing or something like that, where it said that the more options you have, the less happy you're going to be. And that's not always the case. It's a simplification and a generalization, but certainly I've never been conflicted when I've tried to do 2 tracks, one with each microphone. I start to feel very squirrely and insecure, like, I don't know what this is. It's too, what did I just do? What does it sound like? So, and certainly all the great engineers we know would much rather just finish it before it goes in, So I don't know if you guys agree with that. It's pretty universal.
Isn't that what you're playing to? I mean, aren't you playing to a sound? I mean, like if you get a mix and you're like, oh, that sounds good, aren't you playing to that? And isn't that where what you're playing is going to fit best anyway?
Yeah.
I like to have. I know with your setup, Tim, with your Chandler, that it goes through another set of transformers too. That when you're blending these, and anytime that you can add harmonic distortion. I have a Neve summing mixer. I have a few different summing mixers that I can use that have transformers on them that I can blend mics with. And to me, sometimes I'll blend the mics and then I might go through another EQ, or I might go through a compressor just to add color. I might go through my LA2A, or, I might go through another, even after I've gone through my 2 BAEs, I might go through a 550A or something once it's been summed, and just maybe add a little bit more sparkle on it or something. And I just like cascading through those different transformers, and I think it just adds some harmonic complexity to the waves and to the sound, and it just, to me, it sounds better. If you bringing 2 tracks into Pro Tools and then just mixing it in Pro Tools.
Yeah, I have a great story about that I can tell really quickly. I bought an old Ampex. It might be Ampex. It's over there, so I'm not going to walk over and look at it. But it's old silver thing with 4 knobs. It's 4 mic pre's. And I bought it from a friend of mine. I waited like 6 years for him to sell it because he got a bunch of new Neves. And by mistake, I actually double mic pre'd my guitar sound. And it sounded amazing. I mean, I was hooking it up, and just by mistake, I hooked it up to where I was going through double mic pre's. It sounded amazing. And I remember once I was recording a vocalist when I tried to be a producer for 5 minutes before I realized that was not the right job for me. I recorded a vocalist and putting the vocal through two 1176s, that was the way. It was crazy how much better it sounded. So that's just a version of what you're talking about. I have experienced that.
That's amazing. Did you hit those vocals much with those, or was it just passing them through the units and picking up some of the vibe of their electronics and their transformers?
I don't remember exactly how they were set, but it was immediately obvious that it made the vocal, it sounded like a Beatles record or something. I mean, it just sounded like, or, the records we were loving, back then in the 90s.
The 90s are back then now.
Wow.
Just that in your face, like whatever, Sheryl Crow, whatever was around then, where it was just that warm, fat, dry thing where the vocalist could actually whisper or yell, and all of it was just perfectly balanced and right in your face. Recordy, as we call it.
Recordy.
We call it recordy.
Nice.
I've used two compressors on vocals for years. I like the sound of an optical compressor first, just to kind of slow down the transient, then hit it with something that'll grab it faster, like a 1176. Same kind of thing. That'll grab those transients, if they're singing, really loud, and it just kind of will duck it down a little bit. But having the optical one that just, I just think it kind of slows it down, kind of puts the brakes on, and then occasionally you have to just slam those brakes on with the 1176. And I think that I love the sound of using two compressors chained like that for vocals, especially.
That's cool. I just learned something new. Thank you. And also the idea of possibly hitting a couple of pre's, that's pretty cool. I'm kind of
I got to try it again because it was crazy. It was so good. It was so good.
Nice. I'm kind of a fan of doing the 57 and the 121 into a Chandler TG2. So one into each side, and just for rock and roll, to me, that's such a great sound. But maybe try, that's a great idea. I'm going to try run them through a couple of pre's and see what I get.
I've actually gone through pre's. I've come out of I've come out of a Neve and then gone into I've got these Burl B1 mic pre's. I've got B1s and B1Ds. The B1s are nickel transformer, B1D is iron transformer. And I love the sound of those. I was experimenting, and to me, they just had the clipping that you could get from it sounded like tape. So I called Burl, this is years ago in the early 2000s, I called and talked to Rich Williams, who owns Burl, and I said, hey, could you make a summing mixer with those nickel transformers? He goes, well, as a matter of fact, I have the parts for one, for a 32 channel summing mixer, and it's just in a regular steel box, but I'll build it for you. And he custom built this, which eventually became the Vancouver, but I had the first summing mixer that he made. He only actually hooked up 24 channels, but when I would go in and break out my stems to 24 channels, and then he had these you could take the transformers in and out, but you put those transformers in, and it just sounded amazing. It just, to me, that transformer clipping sounded like a tape machine, and I love the sound of that. And
we're big fans of metal. I mean, you go through transformers and you're moving into physical space. You're moving into electrons being affected by material, and it sounds so good. How do I get that great old sound? Well, try this plugin. No, it's like you get things going physically through well-designed materials, and you can get some beautiful sounds. We've got a few questions sitting here, and I just thought maybe we could hit these. One of them was the advantage of an active ribbon mic over a passive. And we were talking about that. Like, most ribbon mics are passive by nature. And Dave Royer and Rick Beato designed the first Bantam-powered 120 ribbon mic with the 122. And quick story for you guys, the 122V, which you both gravitated to, was really designed as sort of a testing grounds for the 122. Dave was not satisfied with what we were hearing in the 122. I thought it sounded great, but he designed the 122V and said, now I've put a perfect head amp on this ribbon. let's compare the two. And we're like, oh yeah, the 122 still needs some work. So that was sort of a something we used to bring up the level of what the 122 would eventually become. And I thought it was kind of gimmicky. You're going to put a tube on a ribbon? Warm meets warm? What? And Dave basically said, no, it's not warm. A tube is not there to warm this up. It's just there to be a perfect head amp, a perfect environment for that ribbon. And there's no restrictions of 48 volts on the circuit. I can do whatever I want to do. And it was Dusty Wakeman who years ago said what you just said in the beginning here, which is that it's like, how do you explain a 122V? It's like you take a 122 and you sprinkle some fairy dust on it, and it's just there's this thing happening. Do either of you want to take a stab at that difference between the passive and the active ribbon mics, or do you think we've nailed that already?
I actually don't really know anything about that, but I will share one story. I had an engineer, a great guy, Bill Molina. We did tons of records with Glenn Ballard. He said, you got to buy this AEA mic pre because it's designed for ribbons and it will wake up your Royer 121 like you've never realized. So I bought this little plastic stereo mic pre from AEA, and the ribbon through it really, it kind of woke it up. So my question to you, I mean, Rick, you could probably answer his question better. I mean, certainly my 122V, that's an amazing story, by the way, that you created something to bring up the level of your main product. And then that thing became kind of your flagship, crazy, top end product. It's amazing. But
that mic ended up going off to Alan Meyerson for some testing, a great scoring engineer in town. He's done all Hans Zimmer's movies.
Yeah, Rick and I. He recorded here last year. Alan did, at my house.
Nice. Yeah, Alan's fantastic. Alan's got four of the V's and has them up all the time. He said basically,
he and Rick are buddies too.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Alan's great awesome guy. What he said about the V's is they have more reach than the unpowered ribbons. Like he's hearing things further back in the orchestra. You get a greater sense of dimensionality. I mean, the whole reason we did the active ribbons to begin with is because when we started, the passive ribbons needed a lot of extra level for things like acoustic instruments. And the pre's had all been designed around condenser microphones, so they didn't have a lot of gain.
That's right.
And the phantom powered mic had 13, 14 dB more level, so you could use it on acoustics and vocals and things that you might not have enough level in your pre to record with the 121. However, most pre's these days, because ribbons have become so ubiquitous, I mean, there are many more ribbons out there than when we started. We were kind of the only game with some AEA recreations at the time when we started, and some of the older ribbons like Coles 4038s were still available, but most people weren't using them. And so they start spreading, and now more people are making higher gain preamps that have good usable level. But that's where that came from to begin with, and a lot of folks are still picking that up. The transformer, just a quick technical note, the transformer in a 121 is called an IE core. Great sound. The 121 is what it is. We moved to a toroidal transformer in the 122 and the 122V. And they're a little more open sounding. It doesn't really change the frequency response, but you get maybe the transient response a little faster, and so you get a little more openness and in the highs. And so there are times when that's a really nice sound, and other times when the 121 is just dead right, say for electric guitars or trumpets or things.
Well, most of the great guitar sounds we hear on records are through a 57 and a 121, so that has not changed. I mean, nope. I love the 122V because I went further. You can get a sound out of anything, and most of the great people I've worked with, it's like it's transportation. It doesn't matter what you use to get the sound. It's, your commitment, your enthusiasm, your inspiration in creating the sound, and that can be with anything. So the R10 or the R21 or the 121 or the 122. I mean, I'm thinking about this right now. I used my 121 through that AEA mic pre that was not expensive. And then I used a 57 through an API for years.
Really?
I forgot. Yeah, I used that, the 120 through this, because Bill Molina said, this is the one for your Royer, and for years I used it. but now you're right. Now I can use my Neves, and it's all been worked out. Now there's a lot of stuff available to where you don't have to get a custom ribbon mic pre.
There is, and we actually addressed that issue recently too. There's a lot of these inline boosters that are out there now where you can plug a dynamic mic or a ribbon, a non-powered ribbon mic into this thing, and you'll get 20, 30, 35 dB of lift.
You guys make one?
We do. Most of them, actually, all the other ones on the market are using FETs, which is kind of an inexpensive way to get there, but the highs get kind of crispy. It sounds a little, I don't know, it's crispy anyway. We designed one that's built more like the front end of a high-end mic pre, and you really hear that the highs are nice. In a couple different steps of gain, 12 dB or 20 dB, so you can plug a 121 into that and get the level. It's not the same personality of the toroidal transformer you get in the 122 or particularly in a 122V, but it's a great way to get extra level, and something like that does wake up a mic because the mic is seeing a different sort of an input on the impedance and lets the ribbon breathe a little easier. Ribbons, passive
should I
ribbons
get that?
Really, what's that?
Do I need that now?
Yeah, you do. I'll send one to you.
Okay. I will purchase one of those.
I would need, if I used an SM7, for example, very low output mic, that you need that extra gain. And when you turn up these, historically you turn up these mic pre's to, with the 120, 121, and then you end up getting noise from the mic pre because if mic pre's are older or whatever, it can be noisy once you crank up the gain like that. So
Yeah.
it was nice, when you guys came out with the 122, that kind of eliminated that, and now with your booster that you have, do you have that right in front of you, John, or not?
I wish I did. I don't. It's the one thing I did not bring out. But one of the reasons we did the booster was because, like, the 121, it was pretty close there in terms of having enough output to get along with most pre's these days. But then we came out with the R10, and the R10 is 5 dB less sensitive than the 121. And it's got headroom for days. That mic, you can really smack it. Yeah, I've got one. There's the R10. And it's a $500 mic. It's $499 as opposed to like a $1,300 121. But with that lower level, especially for people at home, recording at home, you really need some extra crank to record acoustic instruments. And with the D-Booster in line with this, it's really nice for acoustic guitars and fiddles and things. But then on the electric guitar, you can stomp it. I mean, Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters were out for 2 years recently, and that's the only mic on Dave Grohl's cabinet. And on the second guitarist cabinet, and then the third guitarist had a 57 121 blend. But I saw them in concert. I paid for it with my hearing. It was so loud, but it was so good. And you know how energetic that band is. Grohl's just so loud. And that was the only mic on the cab. And there was one mic on that cab for the entire tour. They never had to send it back for re-ribboning or anything. It's quite tough. So it's kind of cool. But this is the reason we designed the D-Booster. It was like, all right, people at home who want to record acoustic instruments, they're never going to find a pre without spending a lot of money that's going to get the level up. So get the D-Booster in there, and there's plenty of gain.
I did not know that, and that's a great testament for that microphone. So any other questions?
Let me take a quick look. And by the way, for folks who were wondering about the 122V, I've got a pair. They're out on loan right now with a friend, but I've got this early one. Look at that. It's a gold-plated one. They're not all gold-plated like that, but there's a 122V. You've got these little fins cut into it for heat because there's a tube in there. You see a little tube glow in there that Rick was talking about earlier. That's the B. Let me get over to the questions. Someone was wondering if a 122 will fit into the axe mount. Yeah, it'll definitely fit. Here's one as a home.
I was wondering that, and I just didn't ask. Yeah,
I think the mics are exactly the same size, actually, aren't they, John? 122 and 121 are basically the same size.
They are. They're, well, let me show you. Here's a 121, same dimension, same width, but a little bit of a different length. So
yeah, but they're the same. Yeah, but they both of them fit in the clip perfectly.
Yeah, they'll fit in there fine. The 122V would fit in the clip. any of the 121, 122, 122Vs, they all fit in
Yeah,
the
I
clip.
use the 122.
They have a
I
1-inch
use the
diameter
122.
body.
Yeah, I use the 122V in the clip. It fits perfectly.
Great.
Man, I've never done that. I've got to put one in. We did have a question about 500 gear. This person working at home has, you know, the 500 racks. Do you use any 500 racks that you really like, Tim? I know I've seen some at your house.
No, I tried
Oh, I
to
thought you
enter
did.
that
Sorry.
game, but I so I can't comment on them. You know, they're great, they're affordable, but no, I don't use any.
I have 3 Purple Audio 10 space 500 series racks. With they're not all, 2 of them are filled. One of them I have a couple of the Q2 Helios, you know, the 765 compressors in one of them. But that's the power supply that I use. If that was what the question was, I like the Purple Audio ones are really good.
BAE makes a great shell. You know, I have one of those. It's like I have one. I use it to. It's like a milk carton in filming. I use it to put my laptop on when I'm filming, and it's crazy. I hate to admit that, but I bought it like 7 years ago, and I never went the, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get lots of cool 500 series gear, and I never did it. So,
funny.
Well, I had bought a lot of, you know, I have a few, I have some 550As, and I've got API EQs. I have a couple Electrodyne EQs and Electrodyne mic pre's and things that are that I like to use on particular instruments, you know, for recording, if I'm recording drums or whatever. And I like the 500 series, even though I have, most of the time I'm using my Neve mic pre's or BAs or Neve mic pre's. So, I mean, if I track guitars, that's what I use. I mean, I don't plug anything else in, but when I'm tracking a full band, then I bring in the 500 series stuff. If I want extra EQs or whatever.
Cool. Guys, we are actually out of time. We've actually run over a little bit, which I kind of figured we'd do. I could probably keep talking with you for like another hour. This is, or more. You both have so much information, and man, I really appreciate you joining us. There are other questions, not many. Somebody's asking what headphones I'm using. These are some ultrasounds that I had from years ago, open back, so I can hear a little bit of the room. And there are a few questions about recording acoustics and things. I'll answer those in the chat. But Rick and Tim, man, you guys, it was so great to have you both here today and get into how you record electric, and then, you know, get into some other things. I really appreciate this. It was so much fun. And let's do it again sometime.
Thanks,
yeah, it was
John.
inspiring. Thank you. Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, all. Really appreciate you stopping by for this.